Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome back. One hopes that you are refreshed. Our final session today, we will be looking at the legal requirements within the application and subsequent contracting as well. Thereafter, we will look at what level of assistance one can be offered post this intervention and also what happens after that. And then finally, the thank you address by our DDG. Thank you. I'll hand over to Stephen, which is the legal advisor for this presidential youth employment intervention. Stephen?
Thank you, Nazim. Afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Mulaya. I'll be taking you through some slides. I think we have up to 6 slides on FICA requirements, a summary of the due diligence checklist, the documents required, as well as the contracting process. So let's start. So we have made available the due diligence checklist. So please go through it and make sure that you respond to each and every question there. If the question doesn't apply to your organization, you just indicate so. We've also made available a standardized grant agreement, which we are trying to ensure that you get to understand before we get into this exciting relationship. Go through it and make sure you familiarize yourselves with some of the provisions. So today we will just talk through some of the issues or some of the items in the due diligence, as well as some of the clauses, just to give you an idea what you should expect and all those kind of things. So as it relates to the due diligence, obviously as the main applicant, you will be expected to provide some explanation about the nature of your organization. Is it an organ of state? Is it an NPO? Is it a PTY Ltd? So you have to state that. We need to understand who you are. You will also be requested to provide some personal information to enable the FICA verification, as well as background checks on the directors or the trustees of a trust. When I say directors, I'm talking about the entire management. So you need to give us the personal information. So this information is basically certified copies of ID, as well as the proof of address. We'll also need some confirmation on your tax affairs with the South African Revenue Service, not older than 30 business days. We also expect you to provide us with audited financial statement for the last 3 years. The next aspect is the institutional and partnership arrangement. So these actually have been talked about this afternoon. Elton spoke about it. Monri spoke about it. So we need you to demonstrate to us, or to give us, a partnership agreement, which obviously stipulates the roles and responsibilities of each partner. In addition, provide us with an organogram and the CVs of key individuals. We also expect you to provide the terms of reference of the Partnership Steering Committee. These documents are just a summary. You are encouraged to obviously go through the entire checklist. We've done it quite well. We've put it in a question form, which actually will be helpful. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So on the governance and controls, we expect some demonstration on your governance structures, the terms of reference of key committees. It could be a board of directors, the risk committees. We ask you to provide those to us. We also request you to provide us with the risk management policies, the financial management policies, as well as the IT policies. And most importantly, the POPI policy, because now we will be dealing with third-party information. And from the beginning of July, POPI Act came into full effect. We are required to ensure that the processing and treatment personal information is in compliance with the legislation. The next aspect is the project model and the project funding model. We expect you to provide us with selection criteria for the identification of the participants, demonstrate to us the flow of funds, demonstrate to us match funding agreement, or usually you can give us a signed agreement if it's already in place. If not, please explain to us how you intend to secure this, even if it means giving us a board resolution from your funders. That will be will suffice. So if funding is coming from a non-public sector, we are requesting that signed match funding. Board resolution if you're providing your own funding, SON statement, signed funding agreement, and financial statements in the event of an individual funder. And if match funding is coming from an organ of state, you should provide to us proof of appropriated funds for the project. The next aspect is the monitoring and evaluation. This is now where you have to demonstrate to us the monitoring and reporting systems. Provide to us the templates of means of verification for each indicator. I think these indicators, Monri, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we have like 6 indicators here. So you should provide us with the templates of means of verification for each of those templates. So you also have to nominate the project specific indicators with targets and appropriate means of verification. Move to the next slide. So we spoke about the monitoring and evaluation. Now the legal requirements of the applicants. These are the CIPC registration documents and confirmation of directors. Where applicable, provide the shareholders agreement. In the event of a trust, letters of authorization. In the event of an NPC, registration certificate from the Department of Social Development. Also provide us material contracts. Things like if you're renting, you can give us or send us a copy of the lease agreement. So material contracts, meaning that this should be a contract that will help you to implement the project. So the lease agreement will do, including obviously the partnership agreement that I spoke about. And if you're operating in a regulated space, please provide to us the necessary approvals. Could be authorizations, could be consent, depending who your regulator is. And also proof of the appointment of your auditors, board resolution and trustee resolution to make an application. So this should be a very important document. Preferably it should be one of the, you should prioritize this. It should actually, so this resolution will actually indicate that you do have the powers or authorization from your principals to make an application. So the idea is to avoid a situation where, for instance, you have committed match funding and the board doesn't actually know about it. So we also expect you to provide us with some consent from the directors for us to be able to do some credit checks. The next one is litigation and contingent liabilities. If there was a judgment against the applicant or any of the partners, please, for the last 2 years, please demonstrate to us. Even if it's a credit-related judgment against any of the directors, please do so. and also indicates if there is any threatened or pending litigation against yourself as the applicant or any of the partners, or if there's any or there are any pending or settled legal issues relating to non-compliance with the laws. This could be relating to your regulators. So that's the part, that's just a summary of the due diligence. And as I said, I encourage you guys to go through the due diligence checklist because that's just a summary. So now we'll go into some of the clauses of the grant agreement. We picked these ones because we thought are quite important for you to know about. Some of the clauses, including the boilerplate clauses, you'll find them in the grant agreement. So the first one is obviously a grant and match funding framework. The way we operate when we contract you, we're not going to disperse the full amount to you. We will work with you. We design our grant agreement in a way that you will work very closely with us. So the idea of match funding framework, grant match funding framework, is to ensure that when we disperse money to you, you must first demonstrate to us that you have deposited money into a ring-fenced project account. Then we will disperse our grant. The next clause that I thought we should talk about this afternoon is the Section 38 undertaking in terms of the PFMA. So this clause is this section is quite important for us. Why? Because you may actually be aware that actually there are 3 ways money can be dispersed or transferred from government to any other institution, whether within government or outside. One of them is through a Division of Revenue Act, which is not applicable in this case. The second one is the famous procurement process, where you're providing services or goods, whereafter you will be paid for those services or goods. And then the third one, which is now applicable here, is where we are transferring a grant for the sake of, in this case, to facilitate employment opportunities. So the PFMA states that before we transfer any funds, we must obtain assurance from you that you have all the financial management and internal control systems in place, which actually explains to some extent why this process is quite detailed, why we request so many documents. It's because it's designed following some of the prescripts of in government, including the PFMA. The next one is the project indicators. This can't be overemphasized. We do have a special schedule just on project indicators. So as Monri indicated, we have 6 indicators. So we will actually, so this is basically our job. For instance, as fund manager, we also are we call the jobs fund. Our main function is to facilitate job creation. So as part of that function, this aspect of project indicators or program indicators is very important to us. And like I said, we'll work with you. We'd like to see how you achieve the project indicators or the deliverables. The next aspect is the ring-fence project bank account. This requirement also speaks to what I said under Section 38, that this is money that actually ordinarily should be spent by an organ of state, but because we don't actually create direct jobs, we work in partnership with you guys. We have to create or facilitate or create an environment where money won't actually just be used for anything else. So we have made a provision that a project bank account should be opened where all the project funds will be dispersed into. The next aspect is disbursement. So we've broken that into 3, but the first 2 is advanced disbursement, which will be done just immediately after you sign the grant agreement with us, and the quarterly disbursements, which will actually be processed as and when you provide your quarterly reports. We've made provision in the grant agreement to enable us to withhold funds in the event where there are things that we're really not happy about. This will obviously be within the grant agreement. We won't just come up with things from the air. We have everything incorporated in the grant agreement. So in certain circumstances, we may actually be forced to withhold funds, like for instance, where the money, we're suspecting that money has been misused. Misused meaning that it's been used for other things not related to the project. The next aspect is the reimbursement of project funds. So using that example, in some instances, money may actually be used. We will be forced to ask you to pay us back, or we demand from you to pay us back, and all those kind of things. So we try to, obviously, working with you to try to avoid getting to that stage. Let's move to the next slide. So those are some of the reporting obligations in the grant agreement. The quarterly reports that you'll send to us for us to, to enable disbursement. There will be an audit report requirement, I think, at the end of each, at the end of the contract. The self-evaluation report, which is important for us to measure whether this project was successful or not. So it will be completed by you. We also have made some provision for other reports, which could include a summative report commissioned by the jobs fund or the fund manager. We've also made a provision for assets. So this really relates to an instance where project funds have been used to buy or to purchase assets that will be used in the project. So there are certain limitations in terms of disposal of these assets. You can't just buy assets using project funds or the grant and then tomorrow you sell them. You have to follow certain processes. We've put that in the grant agreement. We obviously have the termination framework. Just from 2 examples in terms of which the grant agreement can be terminated. One will be in the event where there's a breach and you have failed to remedy following a notice. We are actually entitled, or we will be entitled to terminate the grant agreement. Or in the event where the grant agreement was concluded following corrupt activities will be forced to terminate. The next one is the dispute resolution. We've tried to ensure that we limit this, to a process which is manageable and fast. So we are subjecting this process to the arbitration forum. We've also made a provision for key personnel. So when you contract with us, we'll expect you to designate individuals who will be working with us. The jobs fund will also, or the fund manager will also reciprocate. I might be lucky to work in your project. So you identify key personnel or individuals who will work with us, and then we will actually have some fun. And I think the last one, I think it's the last one. The last one is the POPI undertaking. And like I said earlier, the 1st of July saw the coming into effect, full effect of the POPI legislation. And because we'll be treating or processing personal information, we have made a provision that you will sign an undertaking to the effect that when you obtain information, or when you request information from third parties, you should ask them for their approval, and that you should inform them what the information is going to be used for. So that's actually all about that. Can you go to the next slide? So now this is a contracting process. I mean, we spoke about this process, I think, last week already. But the significance to account for public funds really cannot be overemphasized. So once the investment committee has once we have prepared our assessment of your applications, we have submitted and we have completed the due diligence assessment, and we have submitted that to our investment committee, and they have decided to say, okay, I'm happy with this, or we are happy with this, and we're happy with this. The process that follows after that is called the contracting process. So what that actually entails is that we will prepare there's some documents that we'll prepare, including the letters of approval and the letters of decline for those that actually are not successful. So the approval letters will be prepared, and we will update the grant agreement in respect of each successful applicant. The decline letters will be prepared for unsuccessful applicants, and all these documents will then be circulated internally for consideration by our management. And after internal consideration of these documents, GDG will then sign approval letters and decline letters. And GDG will also be expected to approve the updated grant agreement, which will then be forwarded to all successful applicants. And the decline letters will obviously be sent to all unsuccessful applicants. And all comments that we will receive. So once you receive the grant agreement, if you are successful, go through it and provide your project-specific information. Do not change the standard clauses, just the project-specific information. We will consider that, and including the annexes, most importantly, the ABC PIMP. Will update those documents where necessary. And all those updated documents, grant agreements, and all the annexes or schedules will then be recommended for final approval by the DDG. And the DDG will then approve the grant agreement, which will then be shared with all successful applicants. And then we can set up a date for us to meet and sign the documents. And maybe there will be some bottles of champagne that will pop, you never know. But that's actually the process. And the contracting process is really a shortened process. We try to do things differently in government these days. We try to ensure that this process is finalized within 10 days, 10 business days. So that's actually 2 weeks. So we have done it before. We've been doing it since 2011, and we believe we'll still do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Please continue to post your questions in the chat. From what I can see, there are no queries that have not been answered, but please continue to do so. We will endeavor to answer all of them. I'd just like to say on the contracting, both in terms of the contracting as well as the assessment process of your application. The contract is in the form of a partnership. In fact, this is a partnership, right, between ourselves and your organization. And in the spirit of that, I would encourage all to engage with the Jobs Fund team through those various processes so that we get to the end point as quickly and as painlessly as possible. Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Zamile, who will take us through the post-training support that is on offer from the Jobs Fund team. And just a reminder, please continue to post your chat. Zamile?
Thanks, Nazim. Good afternoon, colleagues. We have now come to the end of this very comprehensive, detailed training session. We have capacitated the prospective partners. So what's next is that the Jobs Fund team is available to support on the completion of the application forms, including the ABC PIMP. So what will happen is we will provide technical assistance. We will not, under any circumstances, complete these applications for our applicants. We can only support, guide them so that we get quality applications for funding. So after we have received the applications for funding after the 25th of November 2021, there will be a time where we will contact them to set up dates for due diligence. It can be virtually or on-site, depending on the situation during our assessments. So when we appraise these applications, from time to time, we will contact the applicants if we require further information so that we get everything we want so that these applications can be presented at the Jobs Fund Investment Committee, which is an independent investment committee. So our support does not guarantee that your application will be successful because the Jobs Fund Investment Committee is an independent body that makes decision, and the decision by the Jobs Fund Investment Committee is final. However, we will make sure that we give the necessary support so that you get successful in your applications, and all the best. Back to you, Nazim. Thank you.
Thank you, Zamile. Surprisingly, we are very good for time. We're well above where we should be in terms of time. And I'd like now to encourage you to use both the Jobs Fund email address as well as the telephone numbers that have been posted by Lerato into the chat should you have any queries that needs resolving prior to the submission of the application. Without an absence, there's a question from Romeo. How can we challenge these requirements if we want to make our complaints? I think I will ask the DDG in her summation and note of thanks to if she can address that issue as well, please, Najwa. Now I hand over to Najwa, our DDG, for the close of the session. Thank you. Najwa?
Sorry, the host was taking a bit long to unmute me there. Okay. So I think first to say thank you very much to everybody that has participated in today's session. A key observation for me in the chat today was there's deep concern among some of the participants that the criteria excludes them. There is deep concern that if they are to come together and collaborate with bigger institutions, then the organizations will be disadvantaged because one, the funds will not flow to them, and two, that the work allocation would be disproportionate. The third observation was about the complexity around the documentation and the templates that must be submitted. I hope that with the session today, we have shed more light and have been able to show you how to complete those application forms. And also, as Amelia said, there will be assistance made available where you have further queries on how to navigate the templates, what to complete in there. We'll just stop short of completing the application for you. I think that in respect of the concern that has been raised specifically about the creative sector and where the programs that have been specifically identified for that sector has not delivered the results that was intended. There was much controversy around the National Arts Council and that particular funding program. While listening to and reading the concerns, I also tried to identify if there are other specific programs that is targeted at the creative sector. Because as I acknowledged in the chat earlier, I don't think that we've been able to find the sweet spot yet in respect of how to structure funding support to this sector. We haven't been able to do that. But what we are trying and what we are trying to demonstrate to you through this session that we had today, even though our application process might be rigorous, where there is going to be collaboration between bigger parties and smaller parties, our processes are such that we ensure that the way in which the money is distributed within the program is commensurate with the responsibilities that various parties will be taking up in that partnership. Our processes are also such that on a quarterly basis, in respect of the evidence that must be provided, we will be able to further track whether indeed the funds are reaching the intended beneficiaries. This is the first funding round that we're going to have for the National Pathway Management Network. And if additional funds are made available, we will revisit the criteria. In fact, while the session has been going on, I have communicated with the various stakeholders the concerns that have been raised within this forum. Can I change it right now in this process? I cannot change the criteria right now. Can I ask those people whose funds we are responsible for and that we will be implementing and dispersing, can I ask those clients to reconsider? Of course I can. And that is what we've done already. I think the chat has also clearly demonstrated that there is a need for a much deeper conversation with the creative sector to understand what are the barriers and then to design programs that are appropriate to addressing those barriers. So having said that, I want people to appreciate that we acknowledge that the design of the funding instrument might not be exactly what this particular sector needs. but we are going to try, and we are going to put in place rigorous processes to make sure that the money flows to where it needs to flow. So with that said, I was also alerted now that there is another fund that has just been launched. It's called the Social Employment Fund. So the Social Employment Fund is being implemented by the IDC. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to see their funding requirements and what their processes are. So I think that at the end of the day, as government, we should be doing better, and we can only do better if there are more quality engagements with the sector to have a better appreciation of those barriers, and to then really see how those barriers can be addressed, and then ensuring that the funding that is made available is channeled through institutions that have the requisite capability to make sure that the funding reaches the intended beneficiaries. In closing, I want to say again, thank you very much for all the questions. Thank you for pushing the envelope. Thank you for challenging us. And I wish you the very, very best, and hope that your application to the fund meets with success. Thank you, and have a wonderful day further.